we're all on lists that we never look at. Dozens of emails come in per day that we never really look at. There's a number of reasons for that. We'll sort of get to those later in the presentation, but really it comes down to offering people something they value. A way to think of that is, what is your superpower, right? What can your organization offer that no one else can, right? What can you tell people or teach people or connect them in certain ways that no one else can do? You're uniquely suited to do. And if you can really focus on that, it's going to be a pretty unique email newsletter. And that's your possibility right there. So can people think of, just off the top of their heads, some of the things that might entail? Or does anything come to you that is sort of your organization's superpower? All right, don't be shy. Anyone? All right. Oh, yes.
My organization is operated by TDSB, which is the name. So people trust Toronto District School Board.
Right. So the Toronto District School Board, a certain amount of
It's
trust.
got a name and it's got history and so prestige.
Okay.
People tend to look at those emails perhaps better.
Okay. Right? I feel like you still need to, and we'll get to this, it's a really good point, that the sender really does matter, whether somebody recognizes. When you're scanning through your emails, deciding what to open, you're more likely to open it from someone you recognize. So it's a really good point, having a good sort of well-established entity.
I'm a receiver, not a sender, but one that I always read is Volunteer Toronto.
Okay.
Because I'm looking for something fun and interesting to do. So
Right.
I'm definitely attracted to what they might offer me someday.
Right. Okay.
I'm always hopeful.
Right. So opportunities to get involved, right? To do something that, improves your life, improves the lives of others. It's a really good one. Anything else comes to mind? All right. Here's some possibilities. So event invitations, right? Really good, just having event listings that might be of interest to people. One thing I should have said that I say every time I start a presentation is don't worry about writing these down. Anything you see up here, I'll send around these slides as a PDF afterwards, including my speaker's notes. So feel free to take notes, but don't worry about sort of getting URLs or different lists of things. You'll get these in PDF format, I think from Tierney afterwards, yeah. So what can you offer? Event invitations are a great one. If you know something about your audience, that there are certain invitations they'll be interested in, really, really useful. Information your supporters want. Anything from sort of how-to guides to latest information. Humor works well. One of my favorite email newsletters comes from a hosting company. They're just sort of a commodity hosting company for hosting websites. But they have just the strangest off-the-wall emails. And they've been doing it for many, many years now. And they're sort of well known for taking the really boring world of website hosting and making it this surreal read every month. So, and then intersplicing it with things that you may want to know, which is quite an accomplishment. And finally, ways to improve their lives. In journalism, they call it the idea of news you can use. And one could argue that that's most of our media these days. But ways to improve their lives, tips, things that might help them in what they're doing. And the thing is that you are, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but it's a good time to bring it up. If somebody has signed up for your email list, you can make certain assumptions about their interests, right? If they have signed up from your website, you can sort of think of the things information that they'll want or ways to improve their lives, right? This is not broadcasting to every single Canadian or every single English speaker in the world. If somebody has signed up to Volunteer Toronto, you can make all kinds of assumptions about what they want to look at and what they don't. So you're in a really good advantage here. You don't have to appeal to every single person under the sun. You know a fair amount about your audience. So here's one example of really fast-growing email list, and they have done really well. They're sort of applying some really well-established list growth techniques from down in the States, techniques and strategies. It's called Lead Now Canada. How many people are on their email list? 4 or 5 people? Right. Can somebody tell me what you think their superpower is? Did you say you're on their list? Yeah?
Just like mobilizing people really fast around just a single core issue and getting action.
Right.
Making you feel that you can actually make a difference on certain issues.
Right. Perfect. So it's giving people an opportunity to make a difference about things they care about. Right? It's the very crux of online campaigning. It's perfect. Did you have something to say? Yeah?
Yeah, from the time I open that email to the time I close and move on to my next task, it's very quick because they told me exactly what they need from me, and I've come to know them
Yes.
and trust them.
Yes.
So I can skim through it really quickly and bang, do what I need to do and get out of there.
Yes.
In 30 seconds, probably.
Yeah. So this is a really great. So that's not by accident. They're very well developed over many years from organizations down in the States, sort of testing what works, keeping the emails sort of action oriented. There's a whole bunch of different elements that, including something to sort of draw the eye, that hopefully shows people. The calls to action are very clear. Call to action being on what you want them to click on and do. Even in what gets sort of in the first few sentences is very, very clear. And it then follows with more calls to action and finally with sort of follow-up information. It's a very specific way of writing advocacy emails. And as you say, it gives you the feeling that you can get involved and make a difference on an issue, which is really, really useful. So that is their superpower. They are if you open the newspaper and start tearing out your hair with something as horrible as going on in the world, and the very later that morning you get an email saying, hey, there's 100,000 other Canadians who are concerned about this. Why don't you join them in sending a message or coming to rallies in your area or something along those lines? That's a real value to their email list. One of my favorites right now is something called FreshBooks. It's a Canadian software as a service provider. Is anyone familiar with FreshBooks by any chance? Yes. Can you say a bit about what they do? Yeah.
Myself?
Yeah.
Basically, it's a way to track billing.
Yes. So if you have your own, that's exactly it. If you have your own business, if you are sending out invoices, this will change your life. Someone I know still, every time they see me, thanks me for it. It was like 3 years ago I told them about it. Sounds super boring, right? Like invoicing, who cares? But this, honestly, this is an amazing, amazing tool. And so notice, though, what they've done here. You maybe can't read this, but what they know their audience. They are small entrepreneurs, small-scale entrepreneurs, small organizations who don't have a huge payroll department, don't have a big financial back office. And so they've crafted this amazing newsletter that is basically, they don't really talk about their product. They don't talk about invoicing. They talk about working for yourself and creative ways to do that and things that you may want to know about. So, customer portrait, we'll get to this in a moment. Customer portrait, Brian Ledbetter of Airtype. An article on entrepreneurship and an article on love the benefits of working from anywhere. They've got a step-by-step webinar they're offering. You can register now for free. There are a number of different events they're inviting you to. They've got a very approachable and friendly demeanor and tone. And so the idea here is the news you can use. If they talked about invoicing or even about, they could have talked about the benefits of different fiscal year ends or different ways of collecting money, but they don't really. They take it a little more broadly, make certain assumptions about their audience, and I think do a really, really good job of it. Can anything else people notice about this email? It might be a little bit hard to read, but even if you can't read the topics, are there things that jump out for you about it? Yes?
I like that it's color consistent.
Yes.
So they're just using basically 2 colors.
Yeah, it's got a fair amount of white space. It's got 2 colors. Nice and clean. It's not very cluttered. Anything else?
It's linked. It's linked.
At the back? Sorry, at the back there.
Characters and
Sorry?
your eye.
Yes.
Key characters.
Yes. So there's a anthropomorphized ice cream cone, fudgesicle, and hot dog. It's kicked off a great start to the summer. This is great, right? This is not about invoicing. This is not about, this is about whimsy, and it's a nice break. Anything else that people notice? Yes.
It's linked.
It's linked.
It's linked to social media, so.
Yes. It's linked to social media. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were saying the length of the message is digestible.
You
Because
have
someone
to
might
link.
links.
Linked, right.
Both.
So both of them, to a certain
Yeah.
extent, yeah, you can follow, move people beyond simply email. Okay. The one thing I want to talk about, and it's a bit of something that we'll look at after the break, is that it's about people, right? There's a portrait of a customer right at the top. There's either mythical people or real people doing things, right? It could talk about, as I say, a million different topics in the way of business, but it's the same principle that applies in journalism. It's the idea of people, right? Like whatever you're talking about, at the end of the day, even if it's invoicing software, which could be a super yawn, they're talking about, they bring it back to people who use their products, and they're showing pictures of that. It seems like a small thing, but it's actually a really, really important thing, and we'll get to that a little bit after the break. But just the idea that people need to be in some way represented in your emails, either by the way it's written, the tone of voice, the sort of the person-to-person communication, the pictures help, but it always should feel that there's people behind it. There's people writing it, and they're writing to you. To start off and talking about measuring your impact, you should Google this. It's the e-nonprofit benchmark study put out by M&R Strategies in the United States. I thought I had the URL at the bottom. I don't. It's quite well known. This is something you trade your email address for, and they will give it to you. What they do is, and it's explained here, we analyze the results of 1.6 billion email messages sent to over 45 million subscribers, and these are the results. So they're focused on online fundraising, they're focused on advocacy, and email marketing in general. So, and this is their 7th year. It is 44 organizations down in the US gave their sort of email data, and M&R put together this study. It's not just this. It's not just this infographic. It's many pages of trends in email marketing, list growth, list engagement. Overall, what they saw, email list growth of 15% last year, and email list churn, or people unsubscribing, of 16%. So there's all kinds of insights in there, the challenges of dealing with email not doing as well as it used to in the past. They have a number of different thoughts for that. But it kind of begs the question, isn't email dead, right? and aren't people on Twitter and Facebook these days? And really, it's not really the case. Email is still quite obviously cost effective and still quite effective. They point out that for every 1,000 email addresses that most of these organizations have, they're relatively large, well-established ones. For every 1,000 email addresses they have, they'll have about 150 Facebook followers. So they still have email is still quite relevant, even though fewer people open and respond every year. It's just slowly going down. I think that's probably because there's just so many more email newsletters out there and people engaging by email. But this will give you a sense of where your organization fits, what your results are compared to other organizations. I highly encourage you to trade your email address for it. One of these key things that we want to look at for engagement is once somebody is on our email list, how often do they open our emails? How often do they read them? How often do they click on the things that we want them to click on? So open rates is a really key metric that we want to follow with the idea of engagement. And basically, your open rate, the number of people who open your email, depends entirely on two things. I would say the subject line and previous experience with the sender. If you don't get both of these somewhat right, or at least one of them really right, people don't open your email. Because they're not only on your list, they're on like dozens of lists, right? And you're basically, we probably all have a folder where our lists go into, and you're scanning it for a subject line that pops out or a sender that you really trust, right? So the correct subject line piques their interest or hints at things that they may want. If you're doing a newsletter that basically has too many things to just have one subject line, it's okay to just be, May 2013 newsletter. But boring subject line, but then you have to follow up with a really good experience, right? Otherwise, you can get away with like sort of teasing subject lines, but you still have to have, you always have to have a good experience with the sender. I think the key thing here, and it sort of follows on with the first half of this presentation, is don't send crap, right? Offer people something that they value, right? The issue, this idea that, we're going to publish something every week or every month, regardless of whether you have something to say, just don't do it, right? You really need to be very, very careful that you offer people a good experience, because 3 or 4 emails in a row that have no value, they're just not going to open the next one. They won't necessarily unsubscribe, but they're not going to keep going. So it's really, really simple, but sort of list abuse is something that you really, really want to avoid. The one other thing that I would avoid is just a pet peeve of mine is please never call it an email blast. That actually really bothers me. Think of something else, like a newsletter or a broadcast or a mass email, but a blast is something that people want to get as far away from as possible. So please don't send any email blasts, but I'm not going to hunt you down if you do. Yes?
I was just wondering what you think. I feel like there's this new trend in email subject lines that are really, really informal.
Mm-hmm.
So like during the Obama campaign, I was getting subject lines that were like, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
How you doing? Like,
yeah.
That sounds like spam.
Yeah, so, but there is a certain part of you that's like, do I know you? And you open it, and then you read it.
Yes.
But I feel like for an organization, it may be not professional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It sort of goes back to the idea of a person being behind it, right? And subject lines, there's something that goes on in our brain, and I can't really stress this enough. We are going to loop back to it. The idea of a person being behind the email that they've sent to you, right? Most of us know that this same email is going out to 30,000 other people. But part of our unconscious brain wants to believe that You know, there's a person writing it to us. I have some funny stories about people not quite getting that idea that it's going out to 50,000 other people. But I think it's actually really important, and that's a part of what that is that the medium needs to have a human element to it. And yeah, I mean, the thing about the Obama campaign is they were so very focused on testing everything they do. So the idea of a split test, where you take a small amount of your list and you send out, if you can't decide between subject lines, you'll send out different ones to a small segment of your list. And if one outperforms the other, one gets a 40% open rate and the other only gets a 20%, you go with the one that gets the higher open rate. So that idea of split testing. And they were doing that constantly. They test all kinds of different elements. So this is something that was working for them. But yeah, the super informal ones, it can work, but you're right. It's showing a bit of personality behind the organization is quite important. So that actually segues well into the next slide. A good email is by, for, and about people, right? It's not about robots. They have the right tone. They are conversational. They're not sort of as though they could be written by a computer or a press release. It is literally person-to-person tone. And as I say, even though it's going out to thousands of people, it's still a letter to a friend kind of idea. I put this one up because somebody submitted it as one of their favorites. You might have seen the request going out. So this is Volunteer Toronto. And right away, it starts with these clearly super pleased with themselves volunteers, right? It just brings the whole thing alive, right? Absent that photo, you can't even read the text from there, but it changes the tone of the whole thing. Then volunteer opportunities of the week, right? Front and center. A great one, right? This is a good email. It's showing people. Obviously, it would be hard not to as Volunteer Toronto, but you need to think of ways to do that for your organization. Include real people, stories about real people. So, email by, for, and about people. To get the right tone, a trick is just to read your email aloud to check the tone and language. If it seems to stutter at certain times, you need to be more conversational. It doesn't mean that you have to write for idiots. It doesn't mean that you have to be super simple with the hey, what's up kind of thing, right? It doesn't have to be informal. It has to be conversational. There is a difference. They were taking that a little bit too far with the completely informal. So there's a bit of a difference between conversational tone and informal tone. If you read it aloud and it sounds okay, flows reasonably well, that's a really good check. Include pictures of real people. There's one caveat to that in a moment we'll get to, but if you can, real people. Sign your email with names and a picture. Really makes a lot of sense, right? People, as mentioned before, after cats, people want to look at pictures of people. And when it comes from somebody, it humanizes it, right? It actually adds a really subtle but powerful idea that this is written by somebody. It's not this kind of voice of God, and will have a good impact on your audience. Any questions about that before any things that pop up? Yes.
So I sell software to charities and churches,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm the whole company. So
Right.
I start out each email with, "Hi, this is Dan Cooperstock,"
Yeah.
about the software that you registered or whatever, and I sign with my name. I've never wanted to put my picture with that because I wasn't sure if there'd be a danger of people think I look too old or something.
Right.
Any thoughts about that?
Looking too old. Or no, for sure. It's an idea of privacy, particularly for women, putting your picture on the internet with your name on it. You need to consider the ramifications of that. What's that?
Because I don't care about that for me.
Yeah. Well, but just your online identity for sure is, you know, an issue. I think the idea with, there's tons been written on this. I think the idea of transparency and authenticity on the internet actually trumps anything else, right? So it's a really good start that you're using your name and it's coming from you. I actually think that, especially since you're not in a super conflict-based role, I don't think there's any harm to it, right? I think there's a certain, when we get a letter from somebody, even if we know it's going out to 20,000 other people, there is something different about that. So I'd encourage you to try it. See what happens. See if more people click. You can look at, there's ways to track what people engage with, and I almost guarantee you that people will spend a certain amount of time, you know, checking out the picture, checking out your bio, right? Most websites, one of the most popular sections of the website is the About Us section, right? Regardless of what you do, people want to know about the people behind what's happening, right? And there's certain strategies for making that work for you, right? We're getting a bit away from email, but people want to know who's sending them this information. I don't think it hurts. I wouldn't worry about people's perceptions of what's going on. Yes, quickly, yeah.
What about in the, for the sake of the sender spot of the organization, if you have an organization that someone really knows,
Yes.
there's a no name, does it
Yeah.
make sense to change it to the no name?
No, I'm always weirded out when I get an email from someone when I don't recognize the name, and it turns out to be a list that I have. Yeah, that I have subscribed to, but I don't recognize the name. I don't know why people are doing that.
Okay, so you prefer the organization name in that?
Yeah, identifiable, right? If it's a
Yeah.
name that they've never heard of, it doesn't make any sense. Even if it's the best subject line, it could look like they'll be less likely to trust it. Great. Okay, so we're running a bit over time. So this is an example of an email somebody sent in. First off, I'd just like to say thanks so much. I mean, it's really tough to put your email out there for the whole group to look at, so you're already a hero in my mind. And there are things that jump out at you in this email, things that are working, things that,
A lot of text.
yeah, there's a fair amount of text, yeah.
Different sizes of text or fonts.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be a big one. The eye doesn't necessarily know where to go, right?
There's no hierarchy of
There's no
importance of the.
Yes. There's no hierarchy of information here,
There's no look and feel, there's no brand to it all.
right? Which is okay. You can have a very simple brand, but I see your point of like immediately identifiable. Yeah. You maybe can't see the text there, but what I like about it is this is a French email, and it says Bonjour Chloé. Fantastic. They do start off with a conversational tone, which is great. I agree. Some of the different colored text is a bit much. You could simplify that. We want to hear what you think. Again, it's putting it. You know, they do care. It's not just about them. It's about the receivers. It's from somebody. There's a survey. There are pictures of some of the theater things that they are promoting in it. So overall, yeah, I feel you could simplify it a bit so that I think this is just a bit too much for your eye to take in. There's just a few too many things here. You might want to make them a little bit easier to scan so your eye moves over them a bit quicker and finds what you're looking for. And then work up the friendly tone of it. Anything else that jumps out for people for that one?
The call to action.
The call to action, yes. What can you say about it?
Oh, it's in the middle, so I can
Yep.
focus.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I do find that first section has, if that's all you read, it does actually have some good info. It,
Mhm.
it kind of shares about this thing, gets you interested, book your tickets, click
Mhm.
here. Like some of these, like the side parts I think are a bit more scattered, but
Yeah.
like that first chunk isn't bad.
Yep. Great. Okay, well, so thanks for the person who sent that in. Yes, yeah, quickly.
I don't get why certain things look like links and certain things don't. Like www.theaterfrontset.com doesn't look like a link, and then the phone number underneath it does. What's like a link?
It's a very good point. Just the this sort of visual grammar of it. This is clearly a link, but it's not underlined. The thing below it. You're right. You want to look at that. Change that up.
Yeah.
Again, the idea of scannable. Your eye quickly goes to what you want to click on, right? And sort of a hierarchy of information through it, and people if you can. It starts to a good start with a conversational tone and a.
So I have a question for you actually regarding this one. This one goes over 2 columns. You have the main text, and on the right you have a whole bunch of links, and lots of mailing lists do that. However, for those that don't have responsive stuff, when you read it on a cell phone, it makes it harder. But I'm wondering if you have any thoughts other than what I just expressed on the 2 versus 1 column for mailing lists.
Yeah, so just the idea of responding to people getting email on their mobile devices, which is obviously growing quite quickly. It's important to see how many people are opening it on mobile devices, and if you can get a responsive design working. So the idea being that a lot of the same information is displayed, it's just in sort of a different order. You don't have to jam everything into a tiny screen. I don't know necessarily what else to say about that in terms of being aware, I guess, that more and more people are reading your email on mobile devices. It's not something I like to do, but it's a good idea to design around that to a certain extent. So, going a bit long. Good email is based on what you know about the recipient. This is something that we touched on really briefly before. The idea of that you know things about your audience. This is a slide that I use a lot. It's a Make Poverty History, something that we sent out there. And one of our big advantages with Make Poverty History is that we had the postal code of everyone who signed up. So what we were trying to do was move Canadian elected decision makers to help alleviate poverty in Canada and overseas. And in this case, this email, what was happening was there was a parliamentary committee deciding whether Canada was going to come up with an anti-poverty strategy, a national anti-poverty strategy. And so we could send very specific emails to the people in the ridings of the MPs who were on that committee. And this was really, really useful. We didn't have to send out to the entire list in Canada, but we could send them this email saying, because you live in Surrey Moose Mountain, you have a special chance to help make poverty history here in Canada. This month, the Parliamentary Committee is meeting in Ottawa to make recommendations on how Canada will deal with poverty. Your Member of Parliament, Ed Kumarnicki, is on that committee, and his vote will help determine how seriously Ottawa takes the fight against poverty. So right away, we're explaining to people, look, you care about poverty because you're on our list. You have a particular opportunity to make a difference in this. And the reason we could do that is because we had our list segmented, right? For any kind of electoral politics, that's really, really key to have it segmented by electoral district. So there's a lot of different ways you can segment your list. Notice here, this previous one, vous parlez français, you can change your profile to get the messages in French, right? These are segments. Just sort of common sense in that case, because they are promoting French theater, but there's a lot of different segments that you can think of and ways to do it. I would say the key things to ask for are the minimum that you want to ask for are the email address. You want their first name so that you can personalize it. It actually goes a long, long way in terms of it's sort of a subconscious cue. When you address them by their first name, it immediately creates more of a hook than dear supporter, dear member. And finally, postal code, really, really useful. It's a lot that you can tell about somebody based on their postal code. You might want to explain why you're using the postal code and also have a reason for it. Like if you are never really likely to send based on geography, you probably don't need to ask for postal code. Yes, quick question?
Yeah, so sometimes we do events by cities.
Yep.
So on our list, we use MailChimp. On our list, we have people put their emails, their name, and their city where they live in. So for us, when we do an event setting, we do an event in Calgary, we just look for Calgary in the list. But then the problem is that the fields were not compulsory when they signed it, so a lot of people don't write their city. So when we put our, when we update our mailing list, I was wondering if we should get the city or the postcode, the postal code. Because with MailChimp, how do you say if I want to have all the people in Calgary, or like in the cities around it? So how do I put this group together on MailChimp?
It would actually be quite a job in terms of finding the postal codes in the area. They would usually be by the first two letters, right? So you'd have, like Toronto, you'd have the first two characters, not letters.
So you can do a search with like the first character.
Yeah, and put them into groups. It's a bit time consuming, but quite worth it. Another, I was just helping somebody today to do this in terms of postal code for Toronto wards. So they've got their entire list, they've got postal codes, and they want to know what ward, whose counselor, who their counselor is, so they can target particular counselors. Yes, really quickly? Yep.
Canada Post has the business service, so you can pick postal codes and walks. And also the Scots director has postal code. Scots director.
Yeah. Okay, so. We're now, are there any other quick questions or comments about engagement? We had a quick look at email is for people. It's definitely not about you, it's about them, right? It's written by a person, it has pictures of people, it's written by a person, hopefully signed. It's segmented, so as we talked about earlier, we already can make certain assumptions about what our audience wants to know, but we can certainly segment based on what people have clicked on. So if somebody has clicked on your previous email, you can send them a different mail than somebody who hasn't, right? It's useful to know whether they've ever been to an event of yours, just different ways that you can segment your audience. Let's get now into measuring impact. And this is, as I say, this is something for the past 18 months. If you've seen any presentation I've given, you will recognize this chart. It's, can anyone tell me where it's from? This pie chart, very simple pie chart. This?
Google chart?
What's that?
A Google chart?
It is a Google Analytics chart. Yes, thank you very much. This basically explains every single website in the world. Every single website in the world. People who come to visit your site come from one of these four sources, right? They either come directly to your website, direct traffic to your website. They sit down at their computer and type in your address, or it's their home page. The blue is search traffic. These are people who Google and one or two people in Bing type in a search term and come to your website. Finally, referral traffic. This is other websites linking to you and sending you traffic. And the thing I love about this is very prominent when you log into Google Analytics. When people think about how do I get more traffic to my website? How do I make sure more people come to my website? This is it, right? It's one of these ways. They either come through search engines, they come from links from outside, or they come from direct traffic. They love you so much, they've memorized your URL and they type it in every time, or it's their homepage, right? There's no other way to get website traffic. There's no kind of magic Twitter button that you can hit, right? That would be referral traffic anyway. And this last one, the yellow color, that's campaigns. That's something we'll get to in a moment. Basically, Google Analytics calls anything you do to drive traffic to your website, they call it a campaign. So whether it's advertising, if it's email, if it's social media, anytime that you send out links into the world, you can put them in that campaign bucket if you know what you're doing. So I just want to take a quick show of hands. How many people have Google Analytics or some other web analytics on their website? Yes. All right. How many people look at it regularly and get a lot out of it? Oh, great. Good. Great. I'm preaching to the converted, because I find one big thing with Google Analytics is drowning in data and jargon, right? These are just words. This, funnily enough, is I scraped one page of Google Analytics, one of the screens, and put them into Wordle, right? And this is the jargon that comes up. Look back, reports, metrics, parameters, customization parameters, experiments, lag time, conversions, multi-channel path audience, all this jargon, right? The problem with Google Analytics, and I've spent a lot of time working with it, is you can just become overwhelmed with like, how do I get useful information out of this? Like actual, not just data, but actually things that I can make decisions based on, right? How can I make this a useful tool? Because it's really easy to install, it's really easy to log into, it's incredibly powerful, it's really high value enterprise class software, but it's not super easy to figure out what the heck is going on. So I'm going to give you 2 tips that I think are really key to basically cutting out all this noise in Google Analytics and just avoiding drowning in the data. So there are 2 things. One is a little bit more complex than the other. If you're not technically inclined, you might want to get somebody who is to help you out. The resources for how to do this are on your worksheet. Those are the Google documentation. But there's 2 things. One is tag the links you send out via email and social media as campaigns. Now this is very simple. It's simply adding a little bit of code at the end of each link that you send out in your email or in your social media. Google has a tool to allow you to do this. You take the URL that you want to send out, you put it into their tool, and they'll give you the URL that you want to send out, right? Even better, MailChimp, I think Campaign Monitor, yes, Campaign Monitor, Vertical Response, all do this automatically if you turn it on properly, right? So really all that's happening is there's a little bit of information appended to the end of your URL. Still goes to the same place. The web treats it in the exact same way. But the beauty is that Google Analytics now knows that people who are following that link are coming from a certain place. Right? I'll maybe make that a bit more clear in a moment. Second thing is setting up goals in Google Analytics. Until you set up goals in Google Analytics, it is that avalanche of data, and you can't really tell what should I be looking at, what matters, and what's totally irrelevant. The moment that you set up goals in Google Analytics, you can kind of work backwards. And so goals are basically the idea of decide what you want people to do on your website. Do you want them to donate? Do you want them to buy something from you? Do you want them to spend 10 minutes and read at least 3 articles? So anything you can think of, anything that you've designed your website to do, you can translate into a goal. And then Google Analytics can track that goal, right? Downloads, email subscriptions, e-commerce transactions, any of those things can be set up as a goal. As soon as you do that, you can track backwards, and Google Analytics, or any kind of web analytics, makes a lot more sense. All of a sudden, you can see, well, 1,000 people came to my website, a dozen of them donated, so I care more about those dozen who donated, where they came from, what they did before they donated, what they did after they donated, how I can get more of them. I care actually a bit more about those 12 people than the other people who didn't donate, didn't sort of reach any of these goals. So doing these 2 things with any of your, particularly with email, if there's one thing that you get out of this measurement idea of things, is start tracking your email. You can track it from MailChimp on who's clicked and who's opened, but this allows you, assuming you're sending them to your website, it allows you to see what they've done once they've come to your website, which is really useful. Now, you can't tell identifiably which person. You can't trace it back to an email address necessarily, or any kind of, it's sort of an aggregate, you know? 1,000 people clicked on the email, and here's where they went in the site, here's what they did. So your pie chart now begins to look like this. You've got your search traffic, you've got your referral traffic, search traffic, direct traffic, referral traffic, and campaigns is this big chunk of visits, right? And so you can tell which email it was that was sent out, which tweet, or was it Twitter, was it Facebook? If each of your campaigns, every time you send a link out for promotion purposes, it gets put into campaigns. So this allows you much more fine-grained sense of what's going on. I'm going to end with a couple of more slides. Bear with me here. So one of the things, if you tag your campaigns and you set up goals, it allows you things like this. It allows you to answer the question, where do donations and petition signups come from? This is one particular campaign. And right here you can see, in this particular campaign, tracking email, online donations, and petition signatures, 52% of it came from email. Social networks accounted for 10% of it. And the rest is direct. That means people coming directly to it. Probably, actually, quite frankly, probably from improperly tagged emails or social networks. And the overlap, and this is what Google Analytics is very good at, is telling you the overlap is people in the previous 30 days who have visited you from both email and social networks. That's that little part of the Venn diagram, right? That is direct and email, that part of the Venn diagram. And this little tiny bit here, those 12 people, that 0.11%, are all three. They've come from email, social media, and directly to your website, right? So this data is available to anyone in Google Analytics who has done these two things, right? And that's just an example of what I'm talking about. That gives you a quick sense, that gives you sort of a quick sense of where things are coming from, but it gives you much more fine-grained data on where your most important visitors, the people who sign up, the people who donate, where they're coming from. You can focus on your highest value visitors. I don't want to give the sense that this is by any means the typical campaign, just to show you that with a pretty high volume campaign, email was 52% of the conversions. To me, that says email isn't dead. This is same organization, different campaign. Social network, in this case, 25%. Email, 9%. And referral. These don't add up to 100 because there's many different things that they can be attributed to, but these are the largest sources. As I say, I'm showing you this because you can easily get this report, and it comes with the ridiculous name of Multi-Channel Conversion Visualizer. But it's right there in Google Analytics if and only if you've both set up goals and done this tracking. Both of which things are not, if you have a reasonably competent web person, they can do both of those things for you. So that would be it. It's basically the idea that if there's, in the measurement, as far as I'm concerned, there's two things that you do. It would be to tag the links that you send out. Because if you're using MailChimp, you know who's opening, who's clicking on things. What you really want to know is who's actually going on to do the, the things that you really want, right? Donating, downloading, reading your entire newsletter from start to finish. So those are those. That's that. Quick recap. I added an extra do there. What superpower do you have to offer? So if we want to look at the whole evening, walking away from this, what superpower do you have to offer? What is the thing that you know about your audience that you can deliver that's going to keep them reading every week, every month? Put people in your email. Either write in a conversational tone, sign it, put your picture on it. It's It's by people, no more sort of very dry emails. We've all seen those. It's by a person, right? It's super valuable. It's for people, it gives them something that they value, and it's about people. Whenever you can slip in stories about people, do so. And finally, track your results. Those 2 steps, I mean, I recognize that web analytics is a huge, huge field. Those 2 steps of tagging your emails or your tweets or your Facebook posts and setting up goals so that you can figure out who your most valuable visitors are. If you do those 2 things, Google Analytics suddenly, it's just a heck of a lot easier to understand, or any web analytics. I keep saying Google Analytics because it's free, and so many websites use it.